Blood Brothers podcast, a Five Pillars production.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends, and the foes out there, and welcome to a very, very special episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain. The reason why it's very special is because there is no podcast that's ever been filmed or shot from a refugee camp. I'm currently at the Bekaa Valley, at the Bekaa refugee camp at the Syrian-Lebanese border, and I have a very special guest with me today, a friend of mine's, a mentor, someone who I actually grew up watching on TV, and now I have the great honour to call him a friend and an advisor and a brother, and that's none other than Yusuf Chambers. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dilly, how are you doing there?
I'm well, Yusuf, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. What an awesome environment. Awesome for many reasons.
I'm still kind of taken back with regards to the fact that we are actually shooting a podcast right in the middle of a refugee camp. And brothers and sisters, it goes without saying that there'll be noise, there'll be kids maybe running about. We can't contain people whose movement has already been contained to further contain them for the sake of the podcast. So have a bit of patience. There'll be some noise in the background. There might be kids and brothers and sisters moving about. We're literally in front of a tent. And before we kick off today's podcast, which is in collaboration with one Ummah charity, there'll be a link in the bottom of the screen where you can donate towards one Ummah's Ramadan food appeal, where you can feed 3 families for the entirety of Ramadan for £90. Yusuf, let's kick it off. This is my first deployment. It's the first time I've ever been in a refugee camp where the oppression, the poverty, which I as a journalist have written about, spoken about, commented on, I'm seeing it for the first time. How long have you been doing humanitarian work for?
Right, I mean, I was doing humanitarian work probably 5 years before I embraced Islam. So it would have been in the late 80s. I went to South Africa, I went to the townships, and of course it was apartheid regime still there. It was the government of national unity had just come in, and I visited the townships, and we found a project where we were recycling rubbish in South Africa back in the days with a woman called Martha Mogadli, a more awesome person. And that was my first kind of work in the townships. And then unfortunately, as happens, is the national corporations I was working with, the British government that had a little hand in it, Nampak, Eskom, the big communication giant, they stole the idea and made profit out of it. So I went back to the university and jacked in my place at the university. I was doing development studies. So that is how I started.
When was your first deployment to a conflict zone or where you went to a camp as a result of wars? When was the first time you went to
I
one of
think
those?
that would have been the Rohingya. 2018.
2018?
Yeah. To be honest, I mean, I've been to unofficially 2 places, but the official deployment with one Ummah would have been 2018, the Rohingya, and we know that there's millions, literally millions, and while those people a lot of them are very desperate, though. You know.
And we'll get to that. Look, one of the discomforts I've had throughout the entirety of our trip here is taking photos and videos of the poor, the destitute, and the miskin. Now, whilst I understand the strategic value of having content to raise money for the very people who we're filming, did you ever have this discomfort?
Yeah, many times. I still do. But the reality is, we live in a world that's led by social media imagery. And the more powerful the imagery, the bigger the impact. So we've got to be up there with the big media organizations in gathering that footage and putting it out there. Otherwise, people won't even give. I mean, it's just a sad fact that we are forced to have to do that. If Muslims were really on their deen and they really loved Allah, they were upon their shahada, you know, testifying there's only one deity worthy of worship, and Muhammad ibn Abdullah is their absolute, you know, destiny in this world, you know, in terms of, you know, who their role model, right? We wouldn't need imagery. I'm convinced of it.
But can we blame Muslims and even our non-Muslim counterparts? But let's focus on the Muslims, that seeing is believing. Wouldn't you say that there's an element of distrust with the charity sectors, that you have to see that aid is being distributed?
Yeah.
You have to see that it's being given to the people that were promised to.
Yes, yes. I mean, look, every time I go to another camp and I see people putting branding on everything, it makes me want to vomit, to be honest. I hate it because it's a form of hezbiya. You're loving the organization more than you're loving the work which sent you there. It was the refugee crisis that was created worldwide, you know, by and large huge numbers of them being Muslims. But the reality is that you know, we're fighting a cause. We're fighting a bit of a losing battle, in the sense that we've got to be taking images. We've got to be sending. We've got to fall in line with the system that we've got. You know, I don't agree with it a lot of the. I hate social media, to be honest.
Pretty good at it though.
But I still hate it.
It has to be done.
It's got to be done. It's one of the necessary evils of living in this 21st century, well, 20th century. Yeah.
I mean, look, just the very fact that we're sat here in the middle of a refugee camp with a family that's probably there, a family literally around us, who have probably gone through the most horrific trials and tribulations, which you and I can't imagine it. And I guess we won't even wish it upon our worst enemies. But they've cleared the space for us. Even though we've said that it's not necessary, but they've cleared it. But even that, there's an element of discomfort for me that we come as privileged Westerners.
Yes.
We've done our bit. Like even when I was speaking to my mum about this deployment, she goes, "Oh, you know, you must be tired. So much hard work." And I was thinking to myself, that's not the case. The case is that the people who we've come to support and help, they're the ones that have gone through such hardship. At what point did you start getting desensitized to it? And by desensitized, I don't mean like you don't have any sentiments or ghira for the Ummah, but desensitized from filming, visiting, handing out aids, photos, videos, all of that.
You know, there comes a time when, you know, when I first used to go into the camps, I used to observe every element of every child's face, every handshake, and really every engagement was important to me. Then I became aware of the fact if I did that, I wouldn't do my job properly. A job properly, what I mean by that, is raising as much money as possible to furnish you know, these miskeen and wayfarers and people that have fled wars and attrition and famine and stuff like that with what they need, essentially. So if I didn't do that, if I didn't kind of make a decision not to get involved in every element of their lives, I wouldn't be doing my job properly. And that's why, so it was almost immediately, as soon as first 3 or 4 camps and I, you know, run out of the camp crying, you know, you know.
Have the tears dried up?
No, no. Yesterday we we had to cry, you know. Some of the stories are just awesomely, that, you know, you can never even imagine that people are going through these difficulties, bro. It's
hard to imagine, isn't it?
It's very difficult to imagine, and you have to keep yourself as a kind of like a fly on the wall documentary sort of, rather than being totally engaged with them. And you know, we are one ummah, you know, in the sense that you won't feel you're part of an ummah until you do this work right. So this is one of the reasons why I do this work, and I constantly remind myself how fortunate I am and how incredibly spoilt our families are living in the West, for inverted brackets.
I mean, even if we put it into context, right? This camp, majority are women widows, right?
Yeah.
Now, 11 years ago, before the civil war started in Syria, they must have come from stable backgrounds. Husbands who had jobs, they had their own homes, they had some element of wealth. And if you'd have spoken to them 11 years ago and said, this will be your situation, they'd have probably thought, are you crazy? And the same, I guess, applies to us. We're comfortable today, we're not comfortable tomorrow, nothing's guaranteed. But staying on work, or as you said, to come and do the job properly. there's a whole discussion now taking place in the UK, without naming any organisations, talking about perhaps the Muslim community should now refocus its zakah and sadaqah strategically to UK projects. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, in a way, I'm part of that movement because I'm sick to the teeth of seeing us always on the back foot, always with our cap in hand, always begging, right? And we need to be the ones who are giving in those countries more and more, in the sense that we need financial security, that we need to have strong masajid, strong community centres that really grow individuals that can be tomorrow's leaders. And I don't see that happening. All the time we keep coming out here and giving 90% of our... It's a beautiful thing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you don't get that reward back, and that, you know, and many of the ayahs in the Quran indicate that you get doubled, multiplied back. We know that. But the fact is that our whole mindset needs to be there and here.
Okay, so let me posit something to you then, yeah? Isn't it a case that when we see a starving Rohingya, Palestinian, Syrian, Uyghur mother, an orphan, a widow, that naturally you are inclined to give towards that than, let's say, 5 pillars, cage, mend, Islam 21C, hugs, whatever it may be? Isn't it a case that when you balance it, that these people literally need food and clothes? Whereas these guys, we appreciate the strategic work that they're doing, but they're comfortable. Because I asked, I mean, there's no data to back it, but naturally when you see someone who's starving, someone who's malnutritioned, someone whose limbs has been taken off as a result of war, aren't you emotionally just more inclined towards giving towards that? Because if you compare the inhabitants of this camp to, let's say, the work of 5 pillars, most people would want to give to them, right? I would want to give more to them.
Yeah.
So are you then saying that there should be a level of balance and proportionality?
Definitely. You know, definitely these people need it more immediately. But then if we were to galvanize ourselves as a community back in the quote-unquote West, Britain, for example, where we come from, hail from, happen to, you know, you know, I mean, if we were to galvanize ourselves, educate ourselves, empower ourselves to be super, you know, intelligent in the way we give, we can easily give to both causes. And yes, there needs to be more of an equilibrium. So if we're giving £1,000 away, you know, give definitely 200 to the UK. Give it to Men's, give it to Cage, give it to Hugs, give it to your local masjid that is empowering.
Notice how Yusuf didn't say 5 pillars. Carry on.
No, because, you know, that goes without saying.
You're going to get it later.
Look, I believe in the 5 pillars, but what's that got to do with this program?
Do you believe in the 6 pillars?
Yeah, no, yes. Bro, but the point is that yes, there needs to be more of a, as you say, an equilibrium between giving here, and this is obvious why we should give. We see, and in fact, I'm not worried so much about the limbs missing. It's the look on the eyes. It's the look in the eyes of the kids who've actually witnessed their mothers being killed in front of them and stuff like that, and being ripped away from the corpses of their loved ones. You know, that is far more powerful. That's what you don't see. That's what they don't see actually. When you come here, you see it every day. You see it every day, and it's horrific. It's yeah, but at the same time, it's going to happen to us if we don't support organisations like Men's, like men that.
Here he goes again.
5 pillars. Cage.
Have men paid you for this?
Hugs. No.
Are you a men agent or something?
No, but men happen to be in my centre in Leicester, and I support their work. And if Cage were here in Leicester, I would do the same. But point being that there has to be a lot more focus on strategic giving, right, for our future. Because it's not you and me. We're going to pass away before, pretty much we'll pass away before the real difficult stuff starts happening, I believe.
Don't write me off so quickly, please.
No. Okay, let me say me. Allahu alam.
No, we could be written
I
off
could be-
anytime. Khalas, we can be written off anytime.
No, but brother, honestly, you've raised this point, and it's such an important point. But the good news is people are waking up. The shabab, the youngsters in the UK, in the West, in America, in Canada, in wherever they are, they're starting to wake up and realize that they don't have to give like Uncle Saab and Ummi Ji and so on and so forth have been giving hundreds of thousands out, mashallah, may Allah reward them with a palace in paradise for that. But also for us to really, really awaken the youth, get them out of the street language, get them out of the street thinking, of the criminality that they've become accustomed to, that the music videos that they're watching, which are making them love this dunya and forget about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Quran, which they grew up with. You know, yes,
I'm gonna have to.
I'm for that.
I'm gonna have to cancel that episode of Dutch Valley now. But anyway, on that point, brothers and sisters, on the lower third, you should see a donation link to One Ummah's Ramadan Food Parcel campaign, where for £90 you can feed a family of 3 for the entirety of Ramadan. Immense rewards to be had there, inshallah, in Syria, in Bangladesh, in Palestine, and 11 other countries. The link should be below. On that note, about strategically giving money to domestic organizations who are thinking about a long-term future of Muslim minorities in their respective Western countries. In the context of the UK, we know that the Charity Commission has had a disproportionate focus towards Muslim charities, right? And this has been proven.
Yes.
The Guardian, the BBC, they've all covered it, right? So this is not something that we've concocted or made up. And some have argued that one of the dangers of refocusing our sadaqah and our zakah in the UK is actually cutting the one tie that we still have with the Muslim world. And that is the sadaqah, the aid work, the humanitarian work. That this still remains one of the bonds that remains within us, and that once you chop that off, or once you start creating a narrative that it's all about British Muslims, American Muslims, Canadian Muslims, French Muslims, Algerian, all of a sudden you've forgotten the Palestinians and the Kashmiris and the Uyghurs and the Syrians and the Iraqis and the Afghans and the Kurds and wherever it may be. Can you see that potential danger happening if we start excessively focusing on the UK or in our respective Western countries?
You know, back in the days I was a socialist. Before Islam, I dabbled in socialism. And we looked at the...
Don't dabble in it anymore?
No, not really. Not really. But I'm very aware of it because I was selling socialist worker party papers on the street. I was doing stuff like that. The reason is because I wanted to do something, for God's sake. I didn't want to, I'd just seen the poor, done my charity work, and now I want to actually change. It's the ideologies, right? And you know, the reason I mention this is because Islam is an international ideology. You can't disassociate what's happening with the Uyghurs right now in China, with the Rohingya who fled unimaginable suffering in Burma, with the Syrians that, you know, in one geopolitical state that's making it happen. And Islam has all the answers. Don't tell me it doesn't have all the answers. I wouldn't be sitting here otherwise, you know. And that's why I'm not a socialist now. I'm a Muslim. I'm a proud Muslim, you know, and I had to come out to the camps, and I have to go back to run my center. And my center is about disseminating the beautiful message of Islam through actualizing the faith. Now, a lot of people know me in Leicester, you know, as a guy who goes out to the camps regularly, and they have respect for me, and they come to the center and they listen to me more. Now, you know, and we don't just support Muslims, right? We support everyone alive. So for me, you know, I've learned in the past making mistakes of being part of a national campaign to socialize Britain, you know, that you can't do it that way. You've got to be there, and you've got to be here, and you've got to have this equilibrium in your thinking, in your intelligence, your research that you do, the PhDs that people are doing amongst the Muslim community. You know, I mean, we know there's more PhDs being done by non-Muslims about Islam, about the history of Islam, about the systems of Islam, and what made it so successful, and how they can take it apart now. Why is it that we Muslims are not doing that? You know?
I think there's some level of agreement here that, look, there is a focus that needs to be had in the UK and broadly speaking, because times are getting hard, Yusuf.
They are.
Times are getting immensely hard. We've been talking about throughout our trip that things are not going to get easier in Europe. Things are getting harder. We're looking at Switzerland imminently to ban the burqa.
Yes.
We're looking at the situation of the Imam's Charter in France,
Yeah.
where you have to basically say that the law of the Republic is higher and greater than the law of God.
Yes.
So the Imams have to sign a charter.
Yes.
We've had the RSC issue in the UK. So the situation is not getting any easier. So we know that there has to be a strategic focus in our respective countries. But what we're basically agreeing on is there needs to be a level of balance and proportionality, right?
Yes, yes, definitely, yeah.
So now moving on to aid work and humanitarian work from a spiritual and political point of view. And it's a conversation that we've had also throughout our journey for the last couple of days. Can you detach politics from humanitarian work? As a humanitarian aid worker, can you detach it from politics? And by detachment, I mean as an organizational perspective and as an individual Muslim.
Well, organisationally, we're sat on by the Charities Commission, by 10 other organisations that see higher internationally, you know, that we don't need to mention their names. I mean, so the first thing is, organisationally, they're very restricted about what they can do, Muslim organisations. Individually, we can do what we like. Bottom line is that there will be
a blowback.
There will be some comeback on that. But I mean, I mean, I studied politics and third world. They used to call it third world development. Then they called it development studies because they made that change, you know. And I recognise that political change, it goes alongside economic change and spiritual change. It's all together. Now, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the most incredible. I mean, as Michael Hart wrote in the book 1974, you know, 100 most influential people. It's no surprise actually to people who know the man that he's number one. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
And I recall Michael Hart specifically said the reason why he ranked him number one was he created a social and moral and spiritual order that spanned beyond the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah, he did.
So, I mean, if I were to ask you, what do you think are the three main causes for why people become refugees? What are they?
That's a pretty deep question. I'd say
war.
I'd say war is not, but war is part of the issue. But what has caused the war, which is economic, wanting to gain imperialism, neo-imperialism, as we would call it now. We got
there eventually.
Yeah, it is. It's wanting to expand territories, expand wealth, ownership of human beings. You know, these people are owned. They're owned by someone. They've been taken out of their place of natural place with their loved ones. That they've been there for centuries. Those families have been there for centuries, if not longer. And they've been ripped out of there because of the war that was caused by this expansionist madman sitting in some office with his suited and booted crew, you know, men and women. And that's the ultimate cause. Number two is the total lack of education. And when I say education, I don't mean what we see in the universities in the world today.
Islamic education?
I'm saying edification.
Oh, edification, okay.
Edification, meaning mothers and fathers sitting with their children and saying, what is life about? Who are you? What are you about? Ahmed, Sumaya, what's your role in life? You want to become a doctor so you can get that big fat cow, a car and that four-wheel drive vehicle over there? You know, what rocks your boat? You know, really having those conversations. I do that with my children. I have to, because I'm just going to be a hypocrite if I don't do that. I mean, so essentially, we need that, and that's the second thing, which is education. The education system is now become very blinkered and very narrow, and you know, you can study a gnat's wing now, and you do a PhD on the gnat's wing. You know, I mean,
if I recall, I think it's Cardiff University. You can even do a degree on David Beckham studies.
Well, that's quite amazing.
Yeah.
You know, quite amazing. But I mean, he does bend it quite well, though, doesn't he?
That was a good one. Now I'm just trying to work out, is the David Beckham studies more important or photosynthesis on Dr. Salman's PhD?
I'd probably say David Beckham has got a few things over Mr. Butt.
Salman's going to write me off, you know that, after this. But look, on the issue of root causes, right?
Yeah.
War is as a result of expansionism, which is a result of global geopolitical control, hegemonic control, whatever it may be. Is it then not the case that charity work, humanitarian work, that essentially what you're doing is that you're just applying a band-aid and a plaster on a very deep wound that will not just reappear, it will reappear in other parts of the Ummah's body?
Yeah, and there are people that want us to continue this work in the manner that we are doing it right now, without making any amendments to that model, you know. But then we have to return to the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because there is a need for one to absolutely to educate yourself and your family, and your every shepherd is in control of their flock. And so there's people out there who've got 5 children, 3 children, 4 children, and 2 wives and 3 wives and whatever. So you're totally responsible for bringing them up as Muslims that will be responsible and will recognize the failings of the world today and make efforts to change it for the future progeny that we have today. So yes, I mean, that's part of it. I didn't give you the third part. The third reason, because I said education, I said this massive hegemonic.
You said imperialism and edification, lack of education. And what was the third one?
And I say well, obviously, and I perhaps should have put the absence of the Deen of Islam
or the Caliphate.
Yeah. Well, look, I ain't going to use that term, but I would use the term leadership.
Okay.
I definitely agree that leadership is something that we are sorely missing.
Thank you. So we got there eventually.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the absence of an Islamic, conscious, transparent, accountable, morally correct, Sunnah-based leadership. One that cares about the affairs of the Ummah.
Yes, and that's what I was talking about when I was talking about the family, because that's the first bit of leadership. And the second bit of leadership is you draw a circle or a concentric circle around your 2 neighbors there. And then another one, there's 40 neighbors according to the understanding of a neighbor in Islam. And then you draw it around now if you haven't dealt with that bit, my worry is that it's not going to have an impact when you go out and start calling them.
Can I just posit one thing to you?
Yeah, go for it.
Did the Prophet ﷺ wait for Abu Lahab to become Muslim before he gave da'wah and sought nusra from the Ansar?
No. So, I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that.
You're saying do both.
Your focus should be on these initial concentric circles. Try and get that right as best. Put all your efforts in, because of course it's up to Allah whether those people are going to respond.
We also know the Prophet ﷺ, when he first was given prophethood, he went to his family first.
Yes.
Khadija radiallahu anha.
Yes.
Abu Talib, Ali radiallahu anhu, Abu Bakr. So it was his immediate inner circle.
It was immediate inner circle. And it's the people, but there is a big problem, bro.
Go on.
And this is what I think everyone's going to agree to this. If they don't, there's something wrong, bro.
Okay.
With me.
Okay.
I mean, I think that the real issue is ourselves, nafsi, because are we good enough to call people to a moral code which we are not even abiding by? I mean, in the sense that our love for the dunya is outweighing our love for Allah and our love for the best example to mankind, Rasulullah.
I agree.
And I think that is the main issue that stops us from, that one of the reasons why I came out to do this work, because I was involved in IERA, with Abdurrahim, my beautiful brother Abdurrahim Green, and
he's just returning your compliments, Green. That's what he's doing. Go on.
And mashallah, what's that? A spider there?
Right,
That's direct from the camp, that one is. Hopefully it doesn't bite, right?
Yeah.
And the da'wah is not just about having conversations, good conversations with people. It's about bringing Islamic reality back to people's lives. So I was thinking the center and the work in the fields. So Allah chose me to do that work. I mean, people just said, look, it's time that you came with us, and I came with them. And it made me grow in my desire to help as many people as possible, and that hasn't stopped. But the reality is that the da'wah is kind of not working unless we've got a movement politically, economically and socially. Multifaceted. It has to be. Can't just be about having a beautiful conversation and they agree with you and they go away, they take shahada, and then there's nothing for them to join with.
Let me posit something to you, Yusuf, and forgive me in advance. I don't mean to offend you in any shape or form. Do you feel that charity work is essentially trying to tidy up the mess and the failure and the murderous negligence of states? Let me just give you one example. Let's move it away from the Muslim sector. Let's just look at the way the UK handled the coronavirus pandemic. Why did it take a 101-year-old man to do all that walking to raise money for the NHS, which we're paying taxes for? Why was the Awam, the public, the British public, raising money for something which we pay our taxes for? And the UK government was just okay to just give us all a clap, the NHS clap. Is it not the case that we're doing the same? War, corruption, economic looting, whether it's done, whether we're doing it to ourselves or we're something externally, isn't the mere existence of charity and humanitarian work merely just trying to tidy up where states are failing?
I look at the issue as being a lowest hanging fruit right now, because I can see the oranges, I'm going to pick them. I have to do that. I could go to the tree and burn the tree down and cause a revolution.
But why? No one said to burn the tree down.
But in the sense, if I don't pick the fruit and then hand it to my brothers and sisters who are right now in need, and then when I go, I mean, my idea would be to go to the field and make a more politically aligned statement, to draw the Ummah together, to get them to think together, work together, educate together, and ultimately to find solutions to let these people return home, okay, in peace, in harmony, yeah? But right now that is not within my realm. I cannot possibly see, I do not have the vision of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I do not have wahi, but I have the example of that incredible bunch of people that changed the majority of the world within the first 100 years of Islam.
But if we have 10 million Yusuf Chambers aid workers that think like this, then where will that come from?
No, but it will come from, because I believe it in my heart that we do need to do that work together. Rome wasn't created in a day, and it won't be destroyed in a day.
But Medina was created in 10 years.
Yes, but with this man who, like I said, is, I mean, just incredible. If you think, we are a mere shadow of the worst companions.
I think it's important for me to say for our viewers and listeners that, wallahi, Brother Yusuf, I know, has played an integral and pivotal role in bringing various Muslim organisations together. Muslim organisations that used to consider each other deviants. I know that you played a key role in bringing many of these organisations together, who are still together and working as much as they can together. So may Allah bless you and reward you for that. Ameen. And you, Dilly. I'm trying to keep the name off thing, and you're just name dropping it. You just don't care. Just let it
No, but you know why? Because I've got my utmost respect for these organisations. Some of them are working under incredibly strained conditions.
No, but you played a key role in bringing everyone together.
Yeah, and and it was tough. And and once I'd done it, I had to walk away because I wasn't the man to lead. I'm not a leader.
You're a maestro. You brought everyone together, yeah. Look, bringing the podcast to a close.
Yeah.
All right. Our brothers and sisters, look at the donation link at the bottom. £90. You can feed 3 families for the entirety of Ramadan in Syria, in Bangladesh, in Palestine. and 11 other countries. Please donate generously, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Bring the podcast to a close. Long-term solutions. Without using the K or the C word, yeah? Let's put that aside. Long-term solutions. We spoke about, inshallah, the formation of a national waqf in the UK.
Yes.
We've spoken about advocacy and soft power influence and lobbying.
Yeah.
Governments that appear to be Muslim friendly or sympathetic.
Yeah.
It's crazy that when we talk about Muslim governments,
Yeah.
we still have to say those who are sympathetic to Muslim
Yes.
causes.
Yes.
Because out of
Yes.
57 Muslim majority secular nation states,
Yeah.
the vast majority, if not all of them, are in the pockets of the 5 greater powers in
Yes.
some shape or form.
Yes.
But even with that, what are the long-term solutions to a global refugee crisis which is mostly Muslim? A fantastic report published by Ayan Institute
Yes.
spoke about the refugee crisis,
Yes.
of which I think it was 100 million.
Yeah. It was.
100 million refugees that are Muslims, that's 0.1 of a billion. And I think the number's actually much higher than that, but that's just like
That's
whatever
just-
stats is
yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
What's the long-term solution? What do you have in mind?
Well, certainly, think tanks. We need international think tanks that can persuade, cajole, meet, greet
Lobby.
decision makers. Yes. I mean, I've kind of done a little bit, not because I was chosen to do that, just because I was there at the right time.
And the Khalijis loved you, innit?
Yes. Well, I'm a white man. What do you want?
The Khalijis loved
I mean,
Khalijis loved
but I've been in those majlis where there's been decision makers, and I've just said it because I just say it the way it is sometimes. I've learned increasingly more and more to temper what I say in those settings, because you can upset people a lot and they won't call you back, and you lose that contact as a potential way of bringing the Ummah together. But I do think, so I've done my fair share of changing people's minds. We need an international body. We've got Ayan Institute that's just happened, or it's just happening, to bring people together and get them to think similarly. Not always totally on an Islamic line, but certainly let's work together.
Which is an Islamic line.
It is an Islamic line, but we're not going to be quoting hadiths and ayat from the Quran and referring to scholars all the time. We're going to be saying, look guys, look at this. This is happening. Look at this as a solution.
And from my understanding, with the launch of Ayan Institute, they want to focus on giving experts, defer the theory and ideas to the experts.
Yes,
right?
Yes, absolutely. So it's not just that, but there's a need for international economic organizations that think out of the box about how we can bring up the new leadership. Do you know there's an organization called Campus Crusade for Christ?
Campus Crusade, they're huge.
Huge.
They're massive.
Hundreds of millions of members worldwide.
Yeah.
And they're using all of these things. They've been using these systems to get people, the top 100 companies in the world, to infiltrate their management systems with people who think like Christians.
But can I just say something? The Campus Crusader guys, they can do that because there's not a global
witch hunt.
There's no global witch hunt.
Yeah.
You know that just in the UK, they're trying to purge out Islamist entries. So we can barely get a job as a civil servant without our views being microscopically dissected, and so is that a fair comparison?
But that's part of the role that those institutions have to take. The think tanks, the economic institutions that are going to fund these people, is to train them how to speak, what to say, what not to say, even to the extent that they don't overtly have to look the part. I'm not saying they should shave their beards and take their hijabs off and stuff like that, but I'm saying they can appear to be part of, and for all intents and purposes they are part of a system, but they have new ideas, they have fresh impetus that maybe those guys need.
Yeah, I'm just, while you were saying that, just the hadith of, war is deception just came to mind. Not that I'm saying that we're wrong.
He's going to get us in trouble, this guy, man.
You've done enough to get yourself into trouble.
All the time, bro.
Is there any concluding words you want to give to brothers and sisters who are already in humanitarian aid work or thinking about it? Is there any bits of advice that you can give to them in terms of the emotional and spiritual preparation and these kind of things?
Yeah, make lots of dhikr. Honestly, remember Allah. Try to, pray your Fajr on time. I really would say Fajr is like the link in to Allah, the creator of the Halq, the seven heavens, samawati wal ard, everything, and you're going out into a world full of challenges, full of deceit, full of crazy people with greed, avarice, and ideas that you're going to have to combat. And the only way that you can really combat that is to have an attachment with the Creator. I get very angry when I'm back in the UK and I sometimes lose that connectivity. And then I come back to these places and I regain the connectivity because I see these guys and I see them smiling.
With their situation.
Massive, I'm saying, and then literally they will tell you, I've lost 15 members of my family, and they'll smile at you and say, thank you very much for what you're doing, and that coupled with the dhikr and the remembrance of the Creator and working as an ummah to try and dissuade people from making the wrong decisions about how to counteract the terrible impacts of that avarice and that greed that we've spoken about, which is driving these people to leave their loved ones and leave their homes and be smashed up. Ultimately, it's to find a balance. Yes, you do need to speak against it. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, none of you have truly believed until you love for others as you love for yourself. But more importantly, if you see an evil, you have to speak against it. You speak against it. If you can't speak against it,
change it with
change
your hands
it
first.
with your hands.
Hands, voice, heart.
So yes, you move it with your hand, then you speak against it, and then the lowest form of faith is that you hate it in your heart. Now all of us hate to see this in our heart, but the question is, how can we change it palpably with our hands? How can we make that happen? And that's where it comes in. We need to get on board with organizations and institutes in your home country so that you can let these guys go back home. Eventually, it might take 100 years, but Allah knows best. Do something.
So on the Day of Judgment, we can say to Allah that we did diddly squat.
Yeah, and that's what really frightens me. If you don't do this work, then you have to contribute towards the people who are doing it. I'm worried about
those who are not doing any work. That's a more scarier thought.
Well,
there are millions of Muslims out there are still waiting for Imam Mahdi to come for anything.
Yes.
You know they exist.
Yeah, of course. And you know that better than I do. You've interviewed a lot of people along the lines.
Yeah.
And it is that one thing which is actualizing the message of Islam publicly.
Yusuf, it was an absolute pleasure. It was an
Nice
absolute
to see
honor to be with you on this trip. May Allah accept your work, my brother.
Ameen.
And make your way heavy in your mizan.
Ameen.
Brothers and sisters, I hope you enjoyed this first of its kind podcast from a refugee camp in the Syrian-Lebanese border. Just a final reminder to donate generously to One Ummah's Ramadan food appeal, where for £90 you can feed 3 families for the entirety of Ramadan. We know of the famous hadith, the very well cited hadith of the reward of the one who feeds a fasting person iftar. Now imagine feeding the miskeen, the most destitute, the most needy iftar for an entire month. The ajr is immense. We need it for our akhirah. They don't need it for this life. We need it for our akhirah. So please donate generously. Donate as if you're feeding your own family, your own parents, siblings and children. Subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel. Leave a comment. Share the video. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Blood Brothers Podcast, 5 Pillars Production.